What a perfect song to get into the message today, because I want to talk about another miracle that Jesus performed. And it's all going to come down to this concept of what was repeated in the refrain constantly: I believe in you, I believe in you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about different stages of believing, and as it showed up in this miracle that Jesus performed. So we come to a miracle, another miracle. It's a miracle where Jesus heals a blind man, where Jesus says something about the man seeing, and then has to touch the man again so the man can see very clearly. And I, for years, asked, what was that all about? What happened when Jesus did that? Was the power of Jesus not enough to heal a blind man at that moment? This was a different kind of blindness that was there. I was puzzled for years about this. Why did this happen the way it did? Everything appeared to be normal in this healing. But yet, Jesus almost takes two shots at this before the man can see clearly. Dare we ask, was there a power problem here? Just too much pressure on Jesus, too many things he had to be doing, too many miracles he was performing. He kind of needed to regroup. I don't know. I mean, when you first look at it, those seem to be logical questions. Or was there more to this healing of a blind man? Maybe something for the disciples. Keep this idea in mind, our big idea today. The Christ follower learns to follow in stages. That's what it comes down to. When I really began to discover what this was all about, this particular healing, the meaning of what happened when Jesus had to take two shots at it, if you will, is seen in the context here of what preceded for previous chapters, where Jesus was doing miracles. And what was the reaction his disciples had? Sometimes the reaction that Jesus would have. Because when you understand the context, you'll understand this miracle, what really took place. This was really a miracle that was teaching his disciples something. That's all it was. Let's get a context here for this. Other miracles and their reactions. I go back to the 6th chapter of the Gospel of Mark. You remember we were here just last week about the feeding of the 5,000. You remember where all these people, not just 5, but tens of thousands of people gathered around, listening for the next word, watching for the next miracle that Jesus is going to perform. And while this is going on, the disciples looked around and say, you know what, these people haven't had anything to eat for a long time. The resources were present if they were looking in the right places, and they were looking with the eyes of faith. So we come down to this passage in Mark chapter 6, verses 36 and 37, where the disciples come to Jesus and they say, send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, well, that would take more than a half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? They didn't take stock in the fact that Jesus was there. He could resource anything he wanted to do. He'd already demonstrated his power and authority over everything. Maybe they should have approached him and said, there's lots of folks around here, thousands and thousands of people. We can't feed them, but we know you can do something. What is it you can do? And show trust and confidence in him. Because you know what happened when he took just 5 loaves and 2 little fish, and they fed everybody with 12 baskets full left over? They just didn't have enough faith to trust in him. There was a limitation they placed on him. He's a great, wonderful person. He does some powerful things, but, feeding this many people? Really? And then there was another situation where Jesus walked on the water. It was after this event took place, the feeding of the 5,000. That night, his disciples went ahead of him in a boat to go to the other side. Jesus went off to pray, and then he came walking to his disciples on the water in the midst of a big storm. You remember what their reaction was? They thought he was a ghost. He's a phantom. That can't be real, somebody walking on the water. But that's exactly what Jesus was doing. And when everything was said and done, you go to Mark chapter 6, verses 51, and the second part of verse 51 and also verse 52. Listen to what is said here. They were completely amazed when they saw this whole thing and tried to evaluate it. they were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. If they'd have understood something about how Jesus could multiply so much out of so little, then they would have understood something about him walking on water. If he's not limited over there with feeding people with small resources, then he wouldn't be limited in terms of walking on water. He could do that too. They were astonished. They were amazed, like anybody else who saw Jesus do these amazing things, but they lacked enough faith to trust what they saw. It was a holdover from the feeding of the 5,000. They just didn't get it. They put limitations on him, even though he would demonstrate time and time again his authority over everything. They would still put those limitations on him. Say, but really, he's just a man, isn't he? Don't understand everything. And then there's a parable that Jesus tells in Mark chapter 7 about what is clean and unclean. It was rooted in Jewish traditions where the Pharisees were walking around just watching every little thing that Jesus and his disciples did. And if they were anywhere at all in their determination in contrast with what the Jewish law said, well, no matter what Jesus can say and do, he can't change our traditions. When it comes to eating certain kinds of food, he can't change his traditions. And Jesus looks at his disciples and says, it's not what you put in your belly that matters. That's just going to go through the system. It's what you put in your heart. That's what really matters. Mark puts a little notation, a parenthetical statement in that text where he says, he said this to say that all foods were clean. He had the authority to do that kind of a thing. But his disciples were discussing this issue. Can he do that? Can he really change the Jewish laws? Can he do that kind of a thing? Look at Mark chapter 7. I want us to consider verses 17 and 18. It says, after he left the crowd, he entered the house, and his disciples asked him about this parable. Notice just one simple response. Are you so dull? He asked. Are you so dull? After watching me do everything that I've done, all the power, are you so dull that you can't even see that I not only have power over nature and physical things that are going on around us, but I have power over everything, even the traditions, that I can take those traditions as a base and build upon that and open up a whole new world for you? Are you so dull you can't even see that? And then there was this considering more about the Pharisees and their influence on the people and how they were wanting to limit Jesus. It's all about limitations constantly. The disciples were discussing the matter of faith in Jesus, but not aware that faith was unlimited. In Mark chapter 8, verses 17 and 19 through 19, Jesus is listening to his disciples talking about the things the Pharisees talked about, realizing these guys were questioning things that were limiting his power. And so, aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Listen to this one, because it's immediately important for the context we're going to look at today. Do you have eyes but fail to see, and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 12 basketfuls. That's how many. There was more than enough to feed everybody. But I like that phrase here. Do you have eyes but fail to see? And Jesus knew they were going to go to a town around the Sea of Galilee called Bethsaida. There would be a man who would be brought out of that. This is the story as it comes to us now in Mark chapter 8, verses 22 through 26. Friends bring their friend to Jesus. We've seen this kind of routine before where friends care about their friend. They want healing for him, so they think, if we can just get him to Jesus, Jesus will make our friend see again. So they bring the friend along to Jesus in town. Can you heal our friend? And Jesus takes the man, and they go outside the city, away from everybody else. And I'm sure the disciples are in tow because they're watching, they're listening to everything. It says that Jesus spits on the man's eyes. Now, I don't get all that, why he did that, but he spits on the man's eyes. And then he asks him a question, can you see? Can you see? And the man is trying to look, and for the first time his eyes are opened up that he can see. Light is coming in, and he can see things. But what he sees is when people are around him, and people might be gesturing and things like that, what he sees looks like trees. Arms look like branches. He can't distinguish. You and I would look at somebody, we can distinguish the color of hair, if we're close enough, the color of eyes. There are features that we can distinguish, but if you can't see very well, then it just looks like trees. And so that's all I can see. It looks like things that are just like trees. So then Jesus touches the man's eyes again, backs away and says, "What do you see now?" And the man says, "I see everything clearly." Can you imagine going from darkness to being able to see just a little bit, and then a second touch comes in there, and now you can see the colors and all their brightness, and you can see features with definition. Can you imagine what that's like to be able to do that? It's really a miracle in 2 stages, but why? People might question, did he just have a power shortage or what? Is this like when you have substations around town for electrical power and a squirrel gets up in there and messes up the substation and everybody loses power in that area right there? Do we have a squirrel run into Jesus' faith at this point and he just didn't have the power to get it pulled off? Or was there something more? And I think after I went through that context of backing up for a couple chapters and showing you the teaching, the power of Jesus, I think there definitely was something more. Here's what it comes down to as we look at this story. First of all, the eyes of faith were open. They were opened. But the man could only see people looking like trees. Now, I can relate to this very well. You know, as I've grown older, there was a time where I couldn't see things like I used to see things, and that's really true today. I wear my glasses, I can see stuff out there, I can see stuff real close to read. Problem is sometimes when I go like to play golf, I tee the ball up and I'm looking down or getting ready to swing. Because of movement that's going on, I know they say you're always supposed to keep your head still, but that's hard to do when you're swinging like that. Sometimes it looks like there's more than one ball on that tee down there, you know, so you don't always hit the ball very well because it's not clear to me. So I've gone to just taking off my glasses and putting them in a case, and I play without my glasses on. So I can see the ball. Everything right here is good. But once I hit the ball, I'll turn and look and say, did you see where that went? Because I'm not seeing the thing go out there very well. Is that right, Pat? Yeah. But then Pat's doing the same thing. See, so but it's kind of understanding what this is looking like. And when I put the glasses on, I can see clearly. That's kind of a second touch for me. I see things. Now I see them clearly. The disciples, at this stage of their faith, saw everything through blurred eyes. I'm going to suggest that's what was going on, and yet you think, you scratch your head and say, if I'd have been there, I wouldn't have done that kind of thing. Well, we've all been kind of conditioned about teaching about what Jesus was all about, his authority and everything, but we sometimes look back at those situations. What was going on with those guys? Why couldn't they see the things that he was saying? He had no limitations on his power and authority. They just saw the beginning of the opening of their eyes of faith, but not seeing Jesus clearly and trusting in him fully, which would change their perspective on everything in life. Oh, they saw the compassion, they saw the love, they saw the power, but they failed to see the implications fully, that it leads to another stage, a stage of seeing life clearly through the eyes of trust. He was amazing, but he was still just a man. There's the limitation. And we might say, shame on those guys. They should have seen better. I mean, they walked with him, for crying out loud. They saw these things happening firsthand. We have to read about them, and we believe. Now, before we get all haughty about that thing and think that we are better than they were, I want us to take a good look at ourselves. When our eyes get open to faith, partly because we see the compassion of Christ, we see the love of Christ, we see the power, the authority of Christ, but we fail to realize that there's so much more to him because we will put our limitations on him. We say, I know he can do some great and powerful things, but, and here's where it is, where we're just seeing our eyes open to faith, but we're really not seeing the whole picture. Let a sickness, a disease come upon us, and it's very serious. Let that happen to us, and we say, Well, I know he's great and powerful, but to deal with this disease, to deal with this sickness, I don't know. I don't know if he's got that kind of power. Maybe it's about fixing a relationship. Broken relationships that sever people from one another. And we know that's not right. We'd like to have the thing brought back together again, but you don't know the hurt. He doesn't understand exactly the hurt. We place limitations that he could even get past some of the stuff that goes on. Fixing a marriage. Can he fix a marriage? Yeah, he can. He can step right in if people will allow him to do it, and they don't just simply see a problem, and they don't simply see Jesus as, well, he's got power, but they trust him. Sometimes it's providing resources. We're running a little low this month. I don't know if we can make all of our bills. What are we going to do? Is he powerful enough to show us to the resources? How about addictions? When people have addictions, we know the big ones: drugs, alcohol. How can we get past all? It's just been a history of it. It's just so strong. I believe in Jesus, but this is too much. I can't get through a day without drugs. I can't get through a day without alcohol. Maybe those are traditional biggies, but what about gambling? People can be addicted to that too. I don't know if he can deliver me from that. What about pornography? Oh, now I've really gone to meddling, haven't I? What about that one? A few years back, we asked Dr. John Walker at Blessing Ranch, of all the people going there, and I'm telling you, probably 75-80% of the people that go to Blessing Ranch for help, they're people who are in leadership ministry. John, what's the number one problem that you deal with people who come here to the ranch? He says, easy. Nearly 60% of the people who come here are addicted to pornography, and it affects everything. Can he deal with those addictions? God, I'm talking about Jesus Christ. Can he deal with all that stuff? And we're sitting there, yeah, I think he can. But when we're forced to look at the situation, when it hits ground zero in us, then the limitations begin to set in. How about give me an answer? I need an answer for a problem I'm going through in my life. How about I just can't have any peace about things. They're going through this thing, and I don't have any peace about the thing. Do we believe the words of Jesus who said, I give you a peace that the world doesn't understand. That's the peace I give you. Well, what in the world does he mean by that? Simply that peace to the rest of the world means absence of conflict, absence of noise. That's what peace is to them. Peace that God offers to us through Jesus Christ is a calmness through those areas of conflict, through the noise of the world. You can have a calmness. The world can't offer that. Can he love through me people who are unlovable? Can he do that? Well, we'd like to sit here saying yes, but when we're forced through our own personal experiences to look at it, oftentimes we say, I believe, but there's something there that just tells me there's a limitation of some kind. Do you remember another miracle that Jesus performed? A guy who was brought to be healed by Jesus, and Jesus looked at him and asked him a question before he did anything at all. He asked the guy a question, do you believe that I can heal you? Remember what the guy said? I believe, but help my unbelief. Oh, step back and analyze that one. Isn't that all of us? I believe in some of those situations that are tough. I believe you can do it, but you're going to have to help my unbelief. That's when you need that second touch of Jesus. We see him, but we see situations as trees. And here's what needs to happen, that the eyes of faith, though they're open right now, are not clear to see things as Jesus sees them himself. So, hence a second touch. What happens at that? The eyes of faith see clearly. Things aren't just sketchy out there. You can see things with crystal clarity. You see, in this healing of a blind man, it was not just for his sake that Jesus did this thing. His disciples watching, he was demonstrating to them something he just said in the paragraph before in our text. And he says, do you have eyes and you still can't see? Look at this man right here. Touch him. Do you see? I see things like they're trees moving around. You don't see with clarity. I'll touch you again. There's clarity, isn't there? I see everything like oh my goodness, I didn't think it could ever be this good. And the man goes away back to his family to celebrate and say, look what Jesus did for me, because he sees everything clearly. And as the man goes away, I wonder, you being the disciples, if Jesus just didn't turn and say, do you get the object lesson, guys? You see what's going on here? I mean, really see what's going on here? You need a second touch. It doesn't question my authority and my power, but trust that I know what's going on and I can handle any situation. The man in our story saw clearly after the second touch, but would the disciples? I think what we're learning is the Christ follower indeed learns about faith and trust in stages. And it's not just one time, but quite often in our lives we need a second touch, don't we? I'm not telling you all anything like from a position I'm standing up here on stage and I'm telling you this is the way it all works and it's the way it works for me. But I'll tell you this, it is the way it works, but I oftentimes in my life and ministry have needed that second touch where I just kind of say, God, I see, but help my unbelief, help my lack of trust here at this point. You have to pray that sometimes, that you're not seeing things as clearly as you should, and you need that second touch from Jesus. Maybe it might be the doubts that we still have. I know who he is, but, oh man, the doubt of, can he really deliver? My question to you is this: how real is Jesus to you? How real is Jesus to you? So real that you wouldn't question anything he tells you. So real that you know that he's in every situation with you. So real that you would confidently trust what he's about to do. How real is he to you? Can he be fully trusted in every situation? You know, it's what we pack around. It's how we respond to things in a consistent pattern. Maybe that's the way we do, that we question anything that God's telling us, anything that Jesus would want us to see or do. We question it, whether it can really happen or not, because we place these limitations on him. And yet we have the tools right there, just like the disciples did. They had everything they needed to step up from a level of just seeing Jesus and how wonderful he was, to trusting in him completely and that he would do wonderful things through them. How about us? We've got what it takes. We know the love of Christ. We know the faith that we are called to. We know that we should trust him. It's all on you. It's kind of like that commercial on TV that you'd ask the question, what's in your wallet? What are you packing around right now? Is it this card that says, I trust him completely? And if you're saying today, I'm not sure that I've got that one in my wallet, then Jesus says, you need a second touch. I've done this thing before. And I know what I can do to bring you to that next stage where it's not just simply faith that says, I believe he's the Son of God, but faith that says, I'm trusting him with any situation, no matter what comes into my life. That's the next stage, is just trusting him. He is not limited. See him, and the world around you will be seen more clearly too. There's that vertical determines the horizontal business again. When you see Jesus clearly, then the world won't be like trees around you. You'll see with crystal clarity. He's bigger than any limitation we can place on him. And with our faith, as it grows all the time, he becomes bigger. It's kind of like the C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia. When the children in the first book, they meet the great lion, the Christ figure, Aslan. And boy, he is phenomenal. Their estimation of him is, he is fantastic, just like we would see Jesus Christ. But they go back to their real world, and then sometime later, they're called back into Narnia for a return visit. And this time when Lucy, the girl, when she sees Aslan, none of the other kids are around, she's walking through the forest and she's thinking things are kind of moving around, the trees might even seem alive, and what does all this mean? And then in a clearing right there he stands. And she walks over to him and she says, Aslan, you're bigger. His response is, well, that's because you are older, little one. And she says, not because you are bigger? Listen to this response. I am not, but every year you grow, you will find me bigger. And that's the way it is with Christ. Every year you grow in faith, you will find him bigger. And sometimes you're going to have that second touch to get you to that next level. I can't speak for everybody who's in this room today, But I just know there probably are some folks here that need a second touch of Jesus today. There's some doubts about what's going on in your life right now, and can he really handle these things? And my prayer is that he will touch you in a significant way, right in your heart. Because here's the conclusion. When that happens, when you receive that second touch, then always you're going to look to Jesus for clarity in life. It won't seem like it's all mixed up and blurred. You'll see life with clarity when you look to him. The second touch. Now, you know we always give an invitation. You know we don't do it a lot of times. Most of the time here, we don't do it with a way of playing a song and everybody walk an aisle and we do 10 verses of Just As I Am. You know we don't do that kind of thing. Unless you want to come and do it, Joe, we'd do 10. Yeah. 10 verses of Just As. We don't do that kind of a thing because we believe that by the end of a service, God is moving in some people's hearts. And sometimes it's us just saying, I don't know. But if you're dealing with some issues and you don't have clarity on those issues, you might very well need that second touch. And he can touch you where you can just say, okay, I feel that I now trust more. But sometimes it comes through when you can go to another person, a brother or sister in Christ, and they can pray for you for that second touch that gives you confidence and clarity. And so we're going to offer that invitation today, that you just would get up when we have our invitation and move over here to the side near the piano, and there will be elders there who will be glad to pray for you. And if that's the need, to pray for a second touch, that they will do that for you. All right? But let's pray first. Father, I thank you for our journey through the Gospel of Mark, learning about discipleship, learning to be a Christ follower. We don't want to just use the name Christ follower or Christian. We really want the power, the clarity that goes with that. And there are going to be times in our lives, and there's people here today that I'm sure facing some of those times right now where they don't see things clearly. They believe that you have great power and authority over all things, but sometimes just because we're humans, we think, well, this is so big, I wonder if Jesus could even handle this. God, I pray that you would touch us. Touch us again with that second touch that makes all the difference in the world. And that may we grow from that to the point where we believe you're becoming bigger and bigger. It's not really the case. It's that we're growing in your faith. We're learning to trust the way we should. And there's such a peace that comes as a result. So, Father, I pray that for every person here today, that all of us, when that time comes, and maybe it's today, that we're facing something that we really, really need a second touch from, that we'll trust that you're touching us. And we can believe that you have our best interest and that you will take care of every situation. We can trust you. Thank you, Father, for loving us, teaching us through the ministry of Jesus. Bless us to be faithful Christ followers, growing in our trust more and more each year. Pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.